I'd also like to remind you that there are no mistakes in life, and this can be tough to take, or perhaps maybe we don't necessarily believe that to be true, especially when we're in the middle of it. But when we can connect to the feeling I think all of us have somewhere deep down inside that tells us that we are held in a way that we can't fully see, and that there is an orchestration to life that we don't really fully understand, and that we don't need to be the one doing the orchestrating, that all the things on our path in some way or another eventually guide us towards ourselves, towards living this life from a place of heart and truth, where we feel more safe and free to express. And in that expression, we have more to give and more to offer each other. And as Ram Dass once said, we're all just walking each other home, and this is a part of it. And I'm so grateful to be standing hand in hand with you right now on this very tiny part of your journey, walking beside you while you stand in the threshold. So all that said, even though it might not feel like it, just to reassure you, you are exactly where you need to be, and you wouldn't be here if you couldn't meet what you're being invited to meet right now. Even if it feels like the most overwhelming and terrifying place you've ever been. So before we go any further, I should probably explain what the threshold is. Although we all have our own definition of things, but the way that I see it is the threshold is the place between, the space between, which is a sacred pause, and the creation of a new beginning. It is the space we find ourselves after we have spent some time in the sacred pause, in the cocoon phase, in the phase where we are mushy and kind of falling apart and unsure of who we are, unsure of where we're going. And then we start to get glimmers of a new life. We start to get a little bit of inspiration maybe, or a glimpse into a dream that we didn't quite see before. And we start to get excited and move towards those glimmers and glimpses. And in the process, the next phase we are met with is the threshold, where in order to connect to those glimmers and glimpses, in order to live into that beautiful dream that we can sense on the horizon, we must meet all the fears and the blocks and the beliefs that are standing between us and the dawn of a new horizon, of a new book, of a new chapter. This beautiful new beginning we can sense but can't quite see. This space is also the space a lot of us get stuck a lot of the time, where maybe we've been in a dark night of the soul and we've let go and we've found ourselves in this cocoon phase, and we start to emerge out of the cocoon, but find ourselves bumping our heads up repeatedly against the threshold, or meeting the threshold and feeling too overwhelmed or too afraid, or what I think is really the main cause, not feeling resourced and supported to walk through something that is really big and scary and confronting. And so because of this, we meet these fears, we meet the intensity of the threshold, we don't feel like we are strong enough or capable to walk through and move through to the other side. And so we shrink back down, we settle for breadcrumbs, we leave our dreams on the table, we choose something that maybe doesn't feel like us, but is familiar and safe. But deep down inside, we know that we've abandoned ourselves in some way, and that there is something within us that is yearning to express and yearning to come forward and live through us. And that is our soul, our true essence, trying to find its way through our heart. And so what happens is we get stuck in this place. We start to loop in this cycle of death and being in the space between and meeting the threshold, bumping our head up against it, not being resourced to fully break through, and then landing back into eventually another dark night of the soul, where our soul is just continually trying to support us to come to this place where we meet ourselves in this threshold, where we see the fears for what they truly are: an illusion, a learned belief, a programmed way of being, and reunite and begin to really see who we really are and our innate value and gifts that we came here to give. And I don't know about you, but right now on planet Earth, things are very intense, and we are continually getting initiated into these death and rebirth cycles because our soul knows and the universe knows that it's time for us to shine, to let our light come through, to let our hearts speak their truth and speak their medicine, and for us to create and live in a way where we are at peace, we are inspired, and we feel generous with the gifts we have to offer. And this is what I'm here to help you with. So, on that same vein, another reminder, there'll be a lot of them, is that sometimes we can get so frustrated and so defeated in this place, and we can start to feel like we might be stuck here forever. We can start to feel defeated, like we might never break through. And just the fact that you're in this place that you are now, just the fact that you're listening to this threshold audio remedy that this random internet person made for you, to me is a sign that you won't be, and that you're very conscious of where you're at, and you're doing your best, and that's all you can do. So use this as much as you need, gather other support as much as you can, and trust that you're so close. And maybe this is the time you break through. And to remember that no time is lost. You're not falling behind. And to really release the pressure and the expectation of how you move through this, when you move through this, the time frame in which you do, because the added pressure only makes a pressureful situation more difficult to move through. And the invitation here is to trust the divine timing of this whole thing. And that if you were meant to walk through the threshold before, you would have. But there were a few other things that maybe you needed to learn, a few other things you needed to do, things that needed to be orchestrated for you. And so I know a lot of us in this day and age feel a lot of the time like we're falling behind. I certainly do. It's one of my biggest emotional moments is when I'm having a good cry because I feel like I'm just absolutely falling behind in life. But in that, I think we've forgotten what's the point of life, and that life is not some track or path for us to walk down and tick boxes as we move through. It's about embracing the journey for what it is and meeting whatever it is that we meet on our path with an open heart and compassion and information an initiation to grow into more of who we are. So despite the constant pressures you might see from the outside world, whether it be on social media or even just in your community, your friend group, what other people are doing, how long it's taken them to do certain things, just remember that none of us escape this human experience. Despite appearances, our souls are all here for the same thing. So the outside can look however it looks, but rarely do we ever see someone's deep internal journey. And for the people at this time on earth who are moving through thresholds and falling into a million little pieces and having death and rebirth cycle after death and rebirth cycle, I think that actually you're much farther along than you think. And the people who are feeling the most intensity and breaking apart are the people who are on the very edge of growth of consciousness. So cheers to you, friend. You're winning at life. So what does it feel like to be in a threshold? Like I said before, it feels kind of like you're being pushed through a pinhole. The way I describe it energetically is in the space between. It's very spacious and dozy and not much really is happening. And that's the magic of it, and that's the point of it. And then when you start to enter the space between, you go from being internal in the feminine energy to transitioning into being more external and working with the masculine energy. And so the threshold is this kind of buzzy energy that wakes you up in many ways. And it's a shaking up of your life, and what is no longer in resonance starts to fall away, starts to become stagnant and heavy. It's like you can't access it anymore. Anything that was tied to an old life or an old dream or an old version of who you were is really no longer accessible. And this new energy is inviting you in. And the thing is, this new energy and all of the beauty and abundance that comes with it is right behind the doorways that are our fear and our beliefs. And the work of the threshold is to meet the fear that is standing between us and who we truly are, and the life that comes with leaning more and more into or expressing more and more of who we truly are. And our job is to lean in, to accept that when we're in the threshold, we're going to be a little bit scared. Things are going to feel overwhelming. We're going to have to face our fears and face the things we've been avoiding. We're going to have to meet the reality in front of us and the fears that come along with facing that reality, and meet it square on. And in the process, having a lot of compassion and patience and giving ourselves as much space as we can, and being supported enough to feel safe enough to go slow. If you're in a threshold, you are very much being invited to grow. And that is both scary and exciting. And all we can do is really accept the fact that that's what it is, not try to make it anything other than what it is, and to fully lean into the experience of being in the threshold, which I hope this audio remedy can help you do, and I hope you can return to it over and over again. One of the reasons why the threshold is a very tight and intense place is because we are forced to meet those fears that have been keeping us hidden and small and safe. And this can also cause us to take a nice little trip into our heads and set up camp there and be really overthinking things and trying to control things. And the more we live our time while we're in the threshold in our heads, the more scary it becomes. The bigger our fears become, the more overwhelming it becomes, the more frustrating it becomes. And it can feel like we are going mad.